Hello and welcome to Wide Angle. This time we focus on the Afghan elections or elections in Afghanistan. To understand the issues involved, we have two experts. In fact, both of them I have myself learned a great deal. On my right, Ambassador M.K. Bhadrakumar, who in fact was looking after the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran desk in South Block, and I remember spending long hours with you trying to understand the issues. Rakesh Sood, of course, has been ambassador to Kabul and in a very critical phase, and he has been an expert. Of course, he is with our National Security Agency and so on. Now, the elections are due on the 5th. There still is no clarity as to who the candidates are. Shall we get past this first difficulty to begin with?
Saeed, the Afghan election looks more and more like Indian election. When you have BJP having an ally in Vaiko, this is politics which has gained traction. The hopeful sign is about Afghan democracy is that it has taken native characteristics and it is coming more and more to resemble Indian practice of democracy. I'll tell you why. After the shortlisting has taken place, you have candidacies which are all multi-ethnic. It's very interesting, a Pashtun candidate having...
Let's simply go through. Abdullah
yes.
is out of the way, or is he very much there?
Well,
Abdullah is there, Ghani...
yes, I'll just come to that. The main... right now, to answer your question, we are at a stage where still what we in India would call electoral adjustments are taking place. Coalition building. Now, coalition building, to my mind, is a very sophisticated practice of politics, And
I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
With the coalition building, Rakesh, who is doing the coalition building? Is it Hamid Karzai? Is it the Americans, who are very much hands-on as far as Afghanistan is concerned? Who is doing this coalition building?
Well, the coalition building is because we have a number of Pashtun candidates, whereas among the non-Pashtuns it is very clear that the leading non-Pashtun candidate is Dr. Abdullah. And as you know, he had also taken part in the election 5 years ago, and at that time he lost and President Karzai got his second term. So this time the Pashtuns are trying to see if they can narrow down the field, and we just saw first Qayyum Karzai, who stepped down in favor of Dr. Zalmay Rasool, who was President Karzai's foreign minister and earlier President Karzai's national security advisor.
Now, therefore, Abdullah is whose candidate? Is he is obviously not Karzai's candidate.
No, I would...
Bhadra?
Saeed, we have a very interesting signal here that after, filing his nomination papers, his first interview was with Christiane Amanpour of the CNN. So I really think we really don't need to probe much into it. And all the American pollsters came up consistently with the assessment that he's a front runner. And that, more astonishingly, that Ashraf Ghani is the second one. The former World Bank official.
I mean, if he's been interviewed by Christiane Amanpour, I have some recollection that when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was fighting with Rafsanjani, the election, I think, is 2004, wasn't it? 2004. And immediately in the course of the election, Christiane Amanpour had 2 interviews back to back with Rafsanjani. And lo and behold, what happened? The anti-Americanism in Iran being what it is, Rafsanjani, poor fellow, lost. So therefore, if Abdullah has given an interview to Christiana Manpur and not to me, then he is going to lose.
Well, but do remember that Dr. Abdullah is fighting the presidential election for the second time.
Yes.
Whereas most of the other candidates are in the election for the first time.
Yes. Yes.
So in that sense, he has a better feel because he was a candidate in 2009 as well.
Sure. Look,
Ghani was also.
But
Ghani was
Dr.
also.
Abdullah came up second.
Yeah,
He put in a fairly credible performance. And he has a strong
we will
team.
go around from candidate. We can come back to this again.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling to resolve this candidature issue, we first have to see whether that agreement, the pact with the Americans, is being signed, and therefore any one of these three who is most willing and eager to sign that pact will have the American backing and therefore will become a front runner, and Christiana Manpur will interview him and he will lose the election.
And Abdullah has pledged to Washington Post that he would sign this pact within a month of his taking over as president. You see, the problem there is no single candidate will put up a strategic defense of the US during the campaign stage because they're genuinely nervous about it. So all have, therefore, all have said that they are for the pact. By the way, Karzai also kept saying that he is all for the pact. It was only day before yesterday that he first time told Xinhua news agency that he doesn't favor it. But he kept saying all along, all till this moment, that he was for the pact. So now, what will happen is what they have said up until now, and when they get elected, if it is someone other than Ghani or Abdullah,
Yes.
I think it's a wide open question. I can explain why.
I think Dr. Zalmay Rasool has also spoken publicly in favor of the bilateral security agreement with the United States. So in that sense, I would say that both Dr. Abdullah and on the Pashtun side, the two leading candidates, Dr. Zalmay Rasool and Dr. Ashraf Ghani, all three of them have spoken in support of the bilateral security agreement.
Right.
And as you would recall, when there was the Loya Jirga, it came out overwhelmingly in support of the bilateral security agreement. Now, subsequently, President Karzai has put in two caveats to it. It is not as if he has said that he is not in favor of the security agreement, but he has put in two caveats in order to ensure that the agreement will fulfill the objectives for which it is intended.
Namely, could you dilate on that, Rakesh?
Well, the two caveats he has put, one is with regard to the fact that the peace process or the reconciliation talks, which have gone on very episodically, that this peace process is something on which serious effort needs to be made, and he would have felt happier if it could have been made the earlier the better. And the second is, in terms of the attacks on civilian Afghans by the international security forces and the casualties therein, and he would like that to be curtailed because he feels that leads to unpopularity of the international security forces in the eyes of the Afghan civilians.
That is a horrendous practice which no Afghan can ever stomach. And how can any Afghan leadership accept the proposition that you have GIs go and break open doors and walk in? What, Bhadran?
I think Karzai has also shifted from one stance to another. He has also, at times, brought in this point, which you mentioned, that the operations will have to have an approval from the Afghan government. This sort of, and unilaterally, the coalition, American forces cannot undertake operations of this kind. This is also coming.
Will the Americans ever accept that?
I don't think so. And we saw that wherever the American forces have been deployed under the American flag,
yes,
or in this case under the International Security Assistance Force, the ISAF flag,
right,
the Americans have retained control over how they deploy their troops. They engage in a process of consultation, but ultimately they take their call based on their own practices. And in Afghanistan, considering the fact that the largest troop contributor by far in the International Security Assistance Force was the United States,
Of course.
and it also remains the largest financial contributor. I would say that the Americans will take the call based on their own determinants.
Here it's a devil's own choice. On the one hand, the Americans have put in so much in terms of blood and treasure that they claim almost a right that if we stay, even the residual forces or the limited number of forces, we will require these kind of rights. On the other hand, any Afghan leadership which signs in on an open-ended occupation, as it were, how will it look to posterity in Afghanistan? Isn't that is that national? Am I raising the right issue, or
Yeah, you see.
No, sorry, I
Yes.
don't think that's correct, because even after the bilateral security agreement,
Yes.
the number of American troops that are supposed to be present is somewhere between 10,000, 12,000, in that kind of range. Now compare this to the size of the Afghan security forces, which has now been built up to 350,000.
have they?
So
been-
therefore,
if
this
they
is-
have really been built up to 350, that's well worth taking stock of. But after a short break.